Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities, and it's going to be really an amazing experience, and I look forward to you joining me on the jar. Hey everybody, welcome back to Mental Health Today. It's your host Ken, and another beautiful day out here on the road, on the jar, and then finding some time, some beautiful quiet time in the afternoon to settle into my room, wherever that may be. Today I'm looking out the window, and I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and so I just got here. It's my first show from here. Did a couple of jar episodes, really good. Met a really interesting person today that actually got up out of a wheelchair, bound to the wheelchair through nerve pain and nerve damage, and posture was what got this person up and moving. And now they've got a whole business around it, and they're a certified posture person. Very interesting journey. Going to be on Mental Health Today next Friday. So if you're watching this show and you have fun, there's another really good one lined up next Friday. Pretty inspiring story. We're going to get to hear the mental health part of it, the journey of, being 20, I think he was 18. And the doctor said, you have the back or the body of an 80-year-old. Imagine hearing that and the despair. Anyway, all that happy stories, but the good outcome was some positive mental attitude. He found his way out. And I think this mind that we've got, this amazing human computer that we've got, requires sometimes some skill and to operate, right? We've kind of figured out that we aren't given many classes. There's no class around how to talk to yourself, how to achieve kind of some communication between yourself and your mind. And I think Sacha, our next guest, is somebody who's kind of maybe not figured it out, but maybe figured out she knows less. As she knows more, she finds out she knows less than we can possibly imagine about the potentials. But Sacha, welcome to Mental Health Today. Thanks for being a guest. Thanks for taking time out to share about what you do and, how can we battle this mental health crisis?
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to being here with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you end up? I mean, I look at your corporate career, right? So I'm snooping on LinkedIn, right? And I'm like, who is Sacha? And I can only tell you by your corporate career, right? And I look at here's a successful person grinding their way, and then there's this change. And then I read a little bit of the bio. And so, you kind of had to find your own way out. Maybe how did you end up in this space?
Yeah. So I was originally in the film industry. So I was a producer, mainly on commercial advertising. And I was pretty much 24/7. I was on the go all the time. I really wasn't leading a very healthy lifestyle, but more in the sense of mentally, because I was doing all the right things. Like I exercised, I ate fairly well, but I wasn't looking after my mind. I was always on a plane. I was in a relationship that really wasn't very healthy, let's put it that way. And that all eventually came tumbling down. I couldn't really live like that anymore. And so what happened was I got very, very sick in around 2009, 2010. And I had all sorts of things. I had adrenal fatigue. I had, I can't even remember, like leaky gut. I had mercury poisoning. I had all sorts of things going on. But the result of it was that I was completely inflamed. So I couldn't walk. So my body essentially shut down. I'm quite a small person, but I looked double my size because everything was so swollen. I couldn't put shoes on because I just couldn't get them on my feet. Like even sneakers, anything like that was just almost impossible. So in the end, I had to stop work. I gave up work for at least 9 months. And for the first 3 months, I was literally just on my couch, just managing the pain. I couldn't really do anything. And it was interesting because it wasn't even like I could think. I was just managing the pain minute by minute because it was really painful. It was kind of to the point where at one stage I was like, if this is life, like I can't, this is not somewhere I want to be and go on with.
Yeah, that was a conversation this gentleman had this morning. The pain was, he literally said, like day by day, and it was like, if this is life.
Yeah. So
That's
I was,
rough.
yeah, it was really rough at that time. So that lasted around 2 or 3 months, but I was very, very lucky. I found an integrative doctor, and he has, or he had, a huge belief in approaching from all angles. So we did treat from the Western perspective. So he helped me with
Okay.
some medication because I did need some of that. But at the same time, he sent me to a therapist. I went to acupuncture. I went to healers. You name it.
Yeah.
I did it all. And it was a 2-year recovery in total, but it was 9 months before I was able to go back to work in some form. But there was still that 3 month initially that it, I really wasn't in any good state at all. It's like the whole world just kind of closed in like overnight. And
Yeah. Wow.
So, but as with all things like this, and I'm sure you've spoken to many people in this respect, this is what changes our lives. And this
Yeah.
is where
Yes.
the gift comes from. So from that space, I didn't suddenly change and become a facilitator of mindfulness and meditation and
Okay. It didn't
kinesiologist
just like
straight
a
away.
magic. There's
It
no fairy
wasn't.
dust.
There was no fairy dust that suddenly changed, but I went back into that industry and had to find a way to do it better. And that's where the mindfulness and meditation came in. I started
Okay.
educating myself more. I became a
Okay.
coach. So I was doing all that on the side before I started moving into the industry I am in now. So I started retraining in around 2013, and I just slowly started to shift out of it. And in 2016, that's when I really drew the line in the sand and became a facilitator of mindfulness and meditation. I studied kinesiology, which I also practice now. And my passion was also to take that back into the corporate space and into the industries
Yeah.
that I came from, because they're the people that really I saw that needed it the most. And I also could relate to them, what they're going through as well. So I can
Right. Right.
speak
Yes.
from that space, with that understanding.
And what do you try? I mean, if I'm a corporate HR person, right? I
Mm,
run a production studio, and
mm.
are they coming to you, or if you come to them, what's the approach? What are you trying to help that solve?
Yeah, they
What's going
mostly
to be the
come to
real
me.
benefit? Yeah.
Yeah, they mostly come to me, but I also do work for other companies that I facilitate for. So it
Okay.
works. It
Okay.
works in both ways. I have my own clients that I've been working with for a long time, and it really depends. It can happen quite differently. So I have regular clients who, for example, I might do a workshop for every quarter or
Okay.
every 6 weeks. And then I'll have other companies that I just go in once or twice.
Right.
And
Okay.
yeah, and we'll talk about mainly in that respect the foundations of mindfulness. But if we do further workshops, dive in deeper, we might talk about stress management. We'll talk about finding clarity. Could be around purpose and values and strengths. So we can start to explore not just the core mindfulness foundations, but we can begin to
Right.
spread that out wider. So they really begin to have a deeper awareness about themselves. And I find that that's where the most effect comes, because particularly pre-pandemic, I always used to feel like I was ticking a box. I'd go in there, I'd do a
Yeah.
workshop, I'd talk about mindfulness, and I'd leave. And I know that most people probably wouldn't really do much from there again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Unless
that,
they
yeah.
really, I was definitely box ticking at that point,
Okay.
which was
Okay.
kind of. I mean, I shouldn't say that for all companies, but that's what I found for most. Yeah, and it really depended on where it came from the top,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
companies were becoming more aware of mental health for their employees, but I don't think they really took that on board until the pandemic hit, and
Yes.
they really had to do something very quickly to support people. And so this is where I really noticed that tipping point and that change.
Mm.
And I love to see that, because companies take their employees' mental health very seriously now. And particularly when it starts at the top, if those
Yes.
if the higher up people, like the CEOs, if the owners of the companies, if they're practicing mindfulness, if they've got a strong belief, if they're showing up and demonstrating how it works,
Mhm.
that definitely flows through to the rest of the company as well. So I think that even makes it stronger for the employees when they get modeled that in the company themselves.
Yeah. I've got a guest scheduled on September 4th, Quint Studer, and Quint is that CEO.
Mm,
I don't think I mean, maybe just because I'm following him and his journey, I don't know of a CEO like him. He has
mm,
like love, like basically love the employees.
mm.
And you look at the values of the company and stuff, and he's living it and preaching it. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah,
So,
and it's
and yeah,
interesting.
yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ken. I was just going to say it's interesting, and I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, but how actually that plays a big benefit for the company itself. Higher
Yeah,
employee retention, less presenteeism, less absenteeism. People love to come to work. They're more connected. So there
yeah.
is not just, there's so many reasons why it can be so beneficial.
Yeah, it's funny, and it's you would think you'd do it just for the bennies, right? All
Mm,
the good things you get out of it, right? Even if it's
mm,
all show, but some people
mm,
still can't even figure that out. Some companies really can't even figure the show part out. And
mm,
when you do see it coming from heartfelt,
mm.
it does, it permeates the organization, right? You can see it down to even the emails and the marketing stuff they do. It's all very human,
Yeah,
very caring. It's got a very caring feel to it.
yeah. But I think as well, employees really appreciate it. And that's what I have
Yes, yeah,
really,
yeah.
really noticed as well since, again, pre-pandemic, where sometimes they felt like they kind of had to be there and like,
Mm,
why am I here?
yeah,
Where now they actually a lot more receptive to it. But even when people attend that maybe they're not so receptive, I always like to think that we're planting seeds. So at
yeah,
some point
yeah,
down the track, if they go through something difficult, they might think, "Oh, what was that mindfulness? What was that meditation about?
yeah,
How can I manage my emotions better?" And so maybe they pick it up down the track. So I
yeah.
always like to think of that dropping the seeds in is really valuable.
Oh, yeah, no, I think you absolutely are. And when they leave, they're also influenced by those, by the people that go out and use it and talk about it
Mm,
later,
mm. Yeah, and
right?
so many more people practice these days, which is fantastic too.
Yeah, the language is not so woo-woo-ish, hippie-ish, right? It's real. The language now is accepted. You can talk like I meditate, and people are like, "Oh, that's not, you're not a woo-woo person."
Yeah. When I first
Yeah.
started, that wasn't the case. And you'd ask, like, how many people have meditated in the room before, and maybe one or two might stick their hands up. Where now, literally, most people, predominantly, I'd say 80 to 90%, would raise their hand that they've
Mm,
had some experience. And even the ones, usually that 10%, they've usually had some, like, at least tried it once. It's interesting. There's been a big shift.
yeah, there was quite a bit of, I believe, Zoom, like in some of the Zoom meetings, there was a lot of HR stuff during COVID,
Mm,
did center around some of this. They would have
mm,
like a meeting, like at 3 p.m., anybody can attend, and it's, meditation time. Everybody's at
mm,
home, but they're
mm.
trying to get you to dial into the network and keep some kind of community going. And then they had to offer something.
Yeah.
That was some
I
stuff
was
we did.
Yeah, I was doing that for a lot of businesses during that time, and it still do,
Okay, yeah,
actually.
oh, yeah, yeah, so
Yeah,
it's a real thing, right? People
yeah,
get
yeah,
that's how they find out.
yeah, and I still do, like, I still worked for different businesses and just take them through meditation classes as well, so they have a regular, maybe monthly class or a weekly class as well, so there's a lot of benefit for that as well, so they feel like they've got something to support them regularly rather than just a workshop.
Are you doing is there any kind of pre and post mood temperature or kind of mental health temperature take? Do you do anything like that? Is that something that's done?
Some of the larger companies that I might work for will do that. Personally, it's just for me, if I'm dealing directly with businesses, it's usually just conversation. I'm not doing any specific research, but I'll be talking to them and I'll be talking about where they're at beforehand, and I'll be talking to them afterwards, because usually these relationships are ongoing. So when we do following workshops, I'll be like, how's the team?
Yes.
What's going on for them? And even when we get onto the workshop, it's not me just standing there talking and showing my PowerPoint. It's like, how are you? What's been going on for you for the last couple of months? How's your mental health? Have you been using the tools? What's worked for you? What hasn't? So it's more of a person-to-person relationship rather than me personally going out and doing huge research. But I know some of the companies that I work for do that.
Yeah, do some of the number. Yeah, they're just curious for the metrics.
Yeah, the number crunching. I've never been a maths person, Ken, so I'm more of a person to person, just having the conversation.
Yeah, I was straddling that horse. I had that double straddled horse. I don't know what you call it. What am I saying? I lived in the world where I didn't really want to, but somehow they were part of my life. So it was in the person world, the insurance world, but it was also, there was a lot of numbers behind it. And the human part was obviously, a lot of fun. I can say there was some beautiful moments in it. There are some beautiful moments, not all just like this. They talk about not paying the claims and everything else. I never saw any of that in the business. I always saw that, the couple of the models that people talk about is we're in the business to pay claims. I mean, that's why you're in you're in the business to pay claims.
Well, I have to say, I've always had a positive experience with insurance companies. So there you go.
Yeah, it's good so far. So far,
so good.
Yeah. So hopefully some of them can become clients.
Yeah.
How, is this, I think what you're doing, getting that kind of the skill set. What other things do employers need? What else do they need in their kind of tool bag? What do you, because maybe you're going in, are you seeing other aspects of what their kind of mental health menu might be, or their strategy? How are they approaching it?
In terms of apart from what I do, or within what I do?
Yes. What else do you see around you? What else, you're part of the strategy. In some places, I'm sure you're the whole strategy. Some companies could be it, in other places, you might be part of the strategy.
Yeah, so I see them doing different things like exercising together. So they might do yoga classes or fitness classes together, or they might have
Zumba.
They might do walking meetings. That's a really great initiative. So rather than sitting down at a board table, I mean, you can't really do it if it's a big team meeting, but if it's just 1-to-1 or 2 or 3 people going on a walking meeting. And doing it that way, getting out in the fresh air, I think that's a positive thing. I also see a lot of the big buildings, so building centres doing things for the offices. So they'll have a lot of initiatives as well. So maybe down in the foyer, and they'll have, they'll have giveaways around mental health, and they can come and have little sessions, or perhaps they can come and get a green smoothie. I saw one thing the other day, which is you actually rode a bike and made your smoothie on the bike. So by riding the bike, actually blended the smoothie, the green smoothie. So I thought that was pretty cool and fantastic. So there's lots of fun ways and initiatives that you can bring in to make it really enjoyable for the team. And I think also what's really important is that connection of the team. And I think when people focus on that as well, like connection within the employees and bringing them together in some way, and really listening to them and hearing what their needs are. And this can be anything from getting together for example, something like a meditation, but it could also be even a Thursday afternoon going out for coffee together. It doesn't necessarily have to
Hmm.
specifically be around mental health, but still having that connection, not just necessarily all about the workplace, but
Mm.
connecting on some level, on a deeper level, I think is really powerful too.
It's the way when you're saying that, it's interesting because this is something I've been thinking about doing with the jar.
Mm,
Is using the jar as kind of a tool like that for a game, and
mm,
allowing employees to kind of watch each other pull from the jar
mm,
and share their interpretation of the question and then their answer. And that humanizing, like you said, this connection, right? Because you'd hear the person, you don't know much about the person,
mm,
Susie in accounting or Bob in
mm,
maintenance, you don't, and there's people send emails to each other. And I don't really like the way your tone of your emails are not very nice. I think she's
mm.
always really, you build up these personas of people that you work with, right? Because you don't know a lot. So you fill in a lot because, that's who we
Yeah.
are. We're human, right? So we paint. I need to have a full picture of who you are, and what I don't know, I'll make it up with some paper mache.
Mm,
And I think what you just said is so powerful, right? When you know somebody, when you have that human connection,
mm,
like food or family, right, or love life, or health, or mental health, right? You have a
mm.
connection. It humanizes people. And then I
Yeah.
think that, it's hard to turn off that compassion, but I think unless you're a psychopath, right, it's
Mm.
kind of hard to turn off that compassion gene.
Yeah, and compassion's so important. It's actually something I talk about a lot in corporate as well. But I love the idea of your jar, like them pulling out a question and they all have to answer it and mindfully listen to each other would be such a beautiful and powerful way for people to connect.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not a question I don't ask you the question, right? It's not
Mm,
invasive, right? We're in it together.
mm.
Whatever question comes out is what comes out. And it's like, uh-oh, we're in this boat together.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah, I'm searching for some victims. I'll find this. I need a little small 5 or 10, 20 company, the right kind of place. Yeah. And I'll find it, I'm sure, when the time is
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But even if it's only like a 5 or 10 minute conversation, so they could
Oh yeah.
share their experience and then that person mindfully listens and then the other one sort of reflects back what they hear and then so they
Yeah.
feel heard. This
Oh
is a
yeah.
mindful listening exercise, by the way, that
Yes.
I
Yeah.
do in
Yeah. Oh,
corporates.
I love.
And and then the other one speaks and shares, and then the person who spoke first listens and then reflects back to that person. So you're actually showing that you are listening rather because so often we're just always thinking about what's going up in our own mind and
Yes.
what we're going to say next. So giving that opportunity for someone to actually be heard
Yeah.
is really powerful. And it's quite difficult sometimes to just sit back and to listen. Yeah. People find it quite hard.
Yeah.
So it teaches on lots of different levels, not only the ability to share, but also the ability to listen.
Yeah. And that's mindfulness right there, just listening, right? Without
Mm,
listening, without answering. And when you said that, it was, yesterday, day before, my guest was talking about his grandma and the influence. And it was like the third interview in a row where grandma was so powerful in their childhood. And it was just, like so touching, right? He's talking about grandma, and these grandmas, you just imagine this, you know, this persona, right, of a person. And she's probably 5'1", 100, 98-pound grandma, right? But she's just this huge impact on this man's life and the way he talks about her. And he said the best part was you could just go and talk to her, and she
mm,
wasn't even listening to say something. She never gave you advice. She never offered any advice. And she just listened. And you knew she
mm,
was listening to listen.
mm, mm.
So it's like what
Yeah.
you just said.
Yeah,
That
and I think it's sorry, I just interrupted you there, and I didn't,
no,
didn't but I
no,
think
we have
it's
a little delay. Yeah, we have a little
yeah,
delay. So it's a little awkward.
I think it's a skill that a lot of us have lost. Yeah, that just listening to listen.
Uh, so it's funny when you said that. It was like those words. He was telling that story, and it was powerful part of the, powerful story
Mm,
about, looking at his mom and his dad, and, not all the greatest examples on those sides, but that grandma there, man, she was the bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me too, my grandmother was like that. And speaking
Oh,
of grandmas, she was probably the most important person in my world back then too. So
I
you've
love it.
got a fourth person
I
with the
got
grandma.
I got a bookend now. It's bookended. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, and as I sat there, I was thinking, that was like a bummer. Like, I didn't have the grandma thing at all, the grandpa or grandma thing. Like, I got gypped on that one. I kind of got gypped. When he was telling me the story at the end, I was like a little bit of that heartache of jealousy, not jealousy, but like a little woe is me, moment. Because it was like the third grandma in a row. And I was like, all right, enough. I'm like, I'm with my own grandma. That was funny. That was cute. So it's good to know. It's good. It's a reminder for people listening, right? Because we're all going to be, I'm a grandpa now. So it's a reminder of the impact you can have.
Yeah.
And being a good human around the kids, and your role is powerful.
Absolutely. So you can have a huge impact. You can be that grandpa to them that you didn't have when you maybe were younger, or the grandma side. But also too, to be able to show kids that, and because kids so much, they're on their phones and their iPads and things like that. So teaching them some of these skills at a young age, getting them outside and, practicing mindfulness, I think is so powerful. I wish we were taught that stuff as kids.
Yeah, that's what I mean, Sacha, my biggest, this is just so strange. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with my intro. Maybe not super articulately. We have this killer supercomputer in our brain. I mean, in our heads, right? Our brain it's the most powerful computer on the planet. We don't even know how it works. Right? We don't know how much disk space has been used. We don't know how much disk space is left. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? So, and there's no class on it. And you're doing something. You're like the closest thing to an actual, course. And people are getting it when they're 50 and 55 years old.
Yeah.
Somewhere at the office. Crazy.
Yeah. I do. I don't do a huge amount in schools, but I do a little bit in schools, and some of the businesses that I work with do a lot in schools, and I love that. It's happening slowly, but I love to see kids learning how to meditate, or just how to become more mindful. It's like these are tools that they need because they're growing up in a very, very different world to what we did. So, like, I love teaching adults, and that's more my thing because I come from that background. I can relate to them. I don't have kids, so it's not like I necessarily I mean, I love kids, but I'm not necessarily on their level like a mother would be, teaching mindfulness to them. But so I just love seeing this happen in schools. And while I don't do it so much myself, I'm so passionate about it. Like, it just makes my heart feel so hopeful when I see kids learning this at a young age, and how my life could have been different if that was the case, if I'd learned at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking when you were saying that, exactly. I was definitely volatile, little testosterone machine. I was a normal boy. My dad kept me busy. No wonder he kept me in every sport there was, because I was just a lunatic. And, I look back, I was an absolute hot mess. I could not imagine being my mother. I was the third boy. We were all completely off our rockers.
All that energy.
All that energy, right? We were just absolute, crazy machines. And I could have used how to regulate myself. Like, there was a lot of times where you lose it, and you have no skill in how to get it back. And you've lost it, right? Even as a 14, 15, 12-year-old kid, you've lost control of your emotions, and you're not in control anymore. Would have been great to find, like, okay, get into the box breathing. Try to get your life under control, son. Take some slow, deep breaths. Would be great to have just that simple skill.
Absolutely. Like, the way I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, but this is whether it's children, adults, whoever.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing meditation and mindfulness has given me is that regulation. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't mean that there's no stress. It doesn't mean we don't have challenges, but I can cope with them. I can get over things in a day rather than maybe months or weeks, like I don't
It's
hang on
true.
to things, I can
Yes.
regulate myself really, really quickly. It doesn't have to go on for days and
Mm.
days and days. So it's building that greater self-awareness. It's having those tools to regulate. I think is just it's had an incredible impact on my life, which is why I teach it now. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the way you just explained that, Sasha. That I kind of the way I said it, and then the way you kind of reflected, right?
Mm,
You're right. When you do when you do lose a little bit, when you lose control,
mm,
right? Or when I used to, right? Like you said, you end up really letting that emotion build up to a point where it's so in your body that it takes so much time to kind of let it go. Even
yeah.
your chemical imbalance, the
Mm,
reaction that you allow to happen. And
mm,
yeah, now that I know a bit, how to control my body and a bit more of my
mm,
emotions, and I'm not 22, all that helps.
mm.
But you're right. I can totally control a lot of that reaction and let it go. I can
Yeah, yeah.
regulate it. I can
You can
self-regulate it out. Yeah.
Yeah, self-regulated. Because I mean, this is a bigger
Interesting.
conversation, so I won't go into it too far, because this is more what I do through the
Hmm.
kinesiology space. Is when we don't process our emotion, when we, because a lot of people find difficult emotion uncomfortable, so they'll
Hmm.
tend to push it away.
Okay.
But what we resist persists. Yeah. So if
Yes.
yeah. So it can get stuck down in our physical body, and that can show up as physical pain. It can show up as anxiety. It can show up as feeling hopeless or fear. All these things stay down in our physical body if they're not processed. But then we act out of that place. So we act
Mm.
from, it's like a protective mechanism. So then we act from that place, from our subconscious. So when other things happen, we get triggered and we act from those
Yes.
places rather than from a regulated space. So the more we can
Mm.
learn to regulate ourselves and process events and things that come up and happen, the more able we are to cope with life. And also,
Mm.
when we meditate, in particular, we are processing things that are going on within our life. We are processing underlying
Mm.
stress. So it helps us to be more regulated.
Oh, that's really interesting. I I like that idea that it just kind of just dissipates out. We don't take it on.
Mm, yeah. So
What's
it really
next for
helps.
you? What are you thinking about next? What are you working on?
What am I working on?
Yeah, what's cooking in your
It's
noodle?
Well, it's much, I hate to say much of the same, but I love what I do. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily going too far out of where I am. As I mentioned, I love working with corporates, and that's something that I will continue
Hmm.
to do. I have several corporate programs, but that they won't really change. That they're quite standard. But on the kinesiology side of things and on the personal development side of things, I'm always coming up with new programs and ways to work with people, particularly people in different parts of the world that I might not always get a chance to be able to see one on one
Okay.
in person.
Okay.
So I'm
So,
a part of my focus is on that, because I do have two quite separate parts to my business in that
yes.
respect. So I'm definitely working on that. But really, what I would love to do is reach as many people as possible and be able to give all as many people tools as I can. That would be my
Hmm.
goal. So it's not just about helping people to regulate, and it's not about, just like with my clients that come to see me one on one, and helping them to process what might have gone on in their life so they can move out, but also to give them agency, to give them tools that they can use for life. Ultimately,
Yes.
not that I don't want to see them again, but ultimately I would love them to go out and be able to shine in
Yes.
their own. They don't need to come back all the time,
Yeah.
right? So you want to be able people to have that self-efficacy, and giving them tools for their life. Yeah, not just for that session. Not just for that week or that month or for when times are hard. These are tools that they can use from when they're children to when they're 90. Yeah. So as many as people as I can reach, I would love that.
Well, yeah, and I think you're on the right path, right? You've been doing the face-to-face stuff. And now it's how do you bring it? And then you did a lot of through COVID, you figured out how to do it remote. So
I was busier than I've ever been.
I'm sure, like, yeah, and that's not a fun busy. That's operating under crisis, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I was almost so busy that I was finding it difficult to manage it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's operating under, for me. It's under crisis. It's like it's not like a controlled kind of plant. It's all of a sudden it's just water's coming in over the wall, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to bail everybody out. You were bailing everybody out. But I think that experience is going to help you figure out a way to communicate with people, like you said, through manuals or through coursework or however you end up workbooks.
Well,
I think the tool set.
Yeah, and I do that. I have quite a few programs on Insight Timer that people can access, and I do actually do probably more work online than I do in person, even for corporates. Even for corporates, because I don't know what it's like in America, but still here in Australia, a lot of people still have days that they work at home now. So it's that real mix of being in the office and being at home. And so, or they have people in different offices around the country, or for example, a workshop I'm doing next week, part of their team is in New Zealand. So I still do a lot online because they want everyone to be able to participate. And often people are at home, some people are in the office, some people are in another city.
Yeah.
So most of my work predominantly is online still.
It's online.
Interestingly, yeah, it totally shifted. Even some of my one-on-one clients, in fact, I would say at least half online as in person.
Yeah, and I think I mean, we lose something when we go online. We're not face to face, for sure. There's no doubt about it. But I think for what you're doing, this kind of skill set, I think is okay. And you can reach more people.
You can reach more people. You give more people the opportunity. So, I mean, I go in and speak in workplaces, but it tends to be smaller groups, which is fantastic. Sometimes bigger groups, but sometimes bigger groups too, anywhere, I guess, between 15 to 100 people or even less or more. But I think when it actually gets so big, sometimes you actually online is even more effective because people can connect and they can write in the chat and things like that, where people sometimes, particularly in bigger groups, might be reluctant to say where they're at. And I'm someone who always invites a lot of conversation. So it can be, if it's a bigger group, I think online is good. But those smaller, more personal groups, like I did something a couple of weeks ago and it was 15 people and they would just, it became a conversation rather than me standing up presenting, which was fantastic. That's the way I like it to be.
Yeah.
More of that for sure. But less PowerPoint, more conversation.
Yes. Talk about mindfulness and watch my PowerPoint.
Exactly.
Somehow that doesn't resonate. Any thoughts, any closing thoughts, you want to leave the audience with any hot tips on mindfulness or how to find you and all that good stuff and how to engage?
Absolutely. My biggest tip is to connect to your breath. Slow your breath down. That will slow your mind down. Just take a moment, a few times a day, just to come back, breathe into your belly, breathe deeply, slow down, connect to your senses again. Even if you just do that a couple of minutes, even 1 minute during your day, it will help you to regulate it. And our breath is the biggest gift that we have. It's free. You don't need to go anywhere. You can do it sitting in a meeting if you need to, if you're feeling triggered or overwhelmed. But I just think it's such an incredible tool, and learning how to breathe properly into your diaphragm, because that signals to the body and the mind that you're safe. So I would highly encourage that. In terms of finding me, you can find me at sachastewert.net, and You can learn more about what I do there. I have a podcast called The Inner Healer, which is all about you learning about your own inner healing gifts. Again, it's about the education. I always like to give people tools.
Yeah.
You can find me on Insight Timer. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I'm around. I'm sure you can pop all the links. I don't know how you do it on the show, but I can send you all the links.
Yeah,
so people
I'll
can
put this
find
for
me.
in a few weeks, or it'll be a few weeks, so we'll get the audio out. Or maybe not even a few weeks, actually. Maybe sooner than that. I have a kind of a trick up my sleeve. Sacha, thanks for being a guest. Really enjoyed the conversation. Fun. We bounced around a little bit, and but I really did the takeaway, the two things that you've got going. Great tool sets, great knowledge to have for mental health. And again, thanks for being on the show and sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken. It was such a pleasure, and it was lovely to connect.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this on audio, thank you very much for being audio, getting this on the recordings. This show also is available live. You can go back and try to find it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And thanks again, everybody. Talk to you soon. See you in 30 seconds, Sacha.
Yeah, loose, baby.
But we're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals at Public Glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glassblowing. Yeah, we're gonna go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.